Today we are doing 1.2 of Algebra 2, where our learning target is students will be able to write linear equations. I encourage you to pause the video and go ahead and try the two warm-up questions on your own. For our first warm-up question, we're finding the slope between these points, so I have to remember my slope formula, and I'm going to label these points x1, y1 and x2, y2. So my slope formula is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. I get 9 minus 2 over 3 minus negative 1, 7/4. Now down here we have an equation of a line where y is always equal to 1 and my slope is 0. A good trick to remember is that if you have two horizontal lines, you can form the letter 0, and that's the slope. And for two vertical lines, you can form the word undefined, because vertical lines have a slope of undefined. So let's get into our learning target, which is writing a linear equation. Now the easiest way to do it is if they give you all the information that you need, right? Slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b, where m is the slope and b is the y-intercept. So looking at these examples here, I've given you all of the information that you need. My slope is 3/4 and my y-intercept is 1. I encourage you to pause and try B, C, and D on your own before I give you the answers. You'll notice on these last two, I do not have placeholders of 0x or a placeholder of plus 0 for my y-intercept. If you have those placeholders, that's perfectly acceptable. So this is kind of the first way to write a linear equation when you're given the information that you want. Our next example is, well, what happens if I'm given a picture, if I'm given a graph of the line? Well, I need two things. I need to find out my slope, and I need to find my y-intercept. So looking at this example here, I see that my y-intercept is at -2. And to find my slope, I need to find another point where it crosses the grid line perfectly. I always read from left to right when I'm finding my slope. I go down 2 and to the right 1. Right? Remember, your up-down is in your numerator when we talk about rise over run. It's up-down over left-right. I then have all the pieces of information I need to be able to write my equation, -2x minus 2. Now over here, this one's a little bit trickier. I do not know what my y-intercept is. I know it's a little bit more than 2, but I'm not exactly certain what that is. So what I want to do is I want to pick 2 points that cross the grid lines perfectly, here and here. So from here, I can see that my slope is up 1 and then to the right 3. So my slope is 1/3. But what's my b? Well, how can we figure it out? What we're going to do is we're going to use the point slope form. If we remember that form before, it's y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So I'm going to take any point I want, and this point might be the easiest, right? It's in quadrant 1, it has positive x's and y's, and this point here is the point 2, 3. So I'm going to plug that in for my x1 and my y1. So I get y minus 3 equals 1/3 times x minus 2. Now all I have to do is solve it for y equals, this is good practice, right? We were doing this before, converting between forms. I distribute my 1/3, and then I add my 3. And if you're struggling with fractions, I do encourage you to use a graphing calculator that has some, fractional capabilities there, because you're going to be able to It's basically, what's the best way to think about this? I think the best way to think about this is if you're using the graphing calculator and you want to add these two things together, you type in parentheses -2 divided by 3 plus 3. Now you're going to get a decimal out from the calculator. Then hit math, enter, enter. And if you don't have a graphing calculator, come see me because you can always borrow one to take home, but there are directions on how to download one to your PC, to your computer. If you don't have a PC, if you have an iPad, there is a Calc 84 app installed on the iPads that you can use. So there is our final answer, 1/3 x plus 7/3. So looking at our next page, there are a couple of different ways to write a linear equation given a point and a slope. And this is the first way that I'm going to show you. The second way I've already shown you. You use the point-slope form. What I found over the years, though, is students don't love point-slope form. They really do like using y equals mx plus b. So these are the directions that you would use to use the y equals mx plus b. So if I give you a point, right, say I give you a point, x and y, and I give you a slope, m, you're going to plug all that information into y equals mx plus b. The thing that you don't have is the b, so that's your second step. You need to solve for b. The third step is the step that students forget the most. You have to plug both m and b back into the equation, because if you're giving me an equation of a line, it must look like this. Y equals mx plus b. Let's do a couple of examples, so hopefully these directions will be helpful. So the first thing I have here is I have the point 3, 8 and a slope of -1. So here's my x, here's my y, here's my m. So I'm going to plug that in to y equals mx plus b. I have 8 is equal to -1 times 3 plus b. 8 equals -3 plus b. I therefore add the 3 to both sides, and I get out that b is equal to 11. So this is step 1. This is step 2. Now step 3 is to plug both the slope and the y-intercept back into this equation. I get y equals -1x plus 11. And you could also write it this way, right? We don't need to actually list the word or list the number -1. We can just do -x plus 11. There is my answer there. I encourage you to kind of pause and try B and C on your own before I do those out. Change my color here. My x, my y, my m. So I get -1 equals 3/8 times 3 plus b. Then I'm going to go ahead and -1 equals 9/8 plus b. Subtract my 9/8, and I get -17/8 is equal to b. So this was my step 1, my step 2 solving here, and then step 3 is I plug both my m and my b into my equation. Let's do our third example here. My x, my y, my m. I have -1 is equal to 0 times 3 plus b. That tells me that -1 is equal to b. So my equation is y equals 0x minus 1, or, right, how we like to write it shorthand, just y equals -1. So there's 3 examples how to do it when you're given a point and a slope. Let's look at our last type of example, is what happens if I'm just given 2 points? Well, all I really have to do is I have one extra step. I've got to find the slope using our slope formula, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Then I'm going to do the exact same thing as before. I'm going to use the slope and one of the given points. I don't have to use both of them, I just pick one of the points to do. I solve for b, and then I plug m and b back into my equation. Let's go ahead and do this example. Sorry, I had that saved in there from last class. Here's my x1, my y1, my x2, and my y2. So I've got to do my first step, which is calculating my slope. Remember, it's y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. I get 10 minus negative 2 over 2 minus 5. 12 over negative 3, I get a slope of negative 4. I then take my slope and either one of my points. And you know what? I'm going to use this point here, because there's no negatives. So I'm less likely to kind of have an error. This was step 1. My step 2. So I have y equals mx plus b, and I'm going to plug in the pieces of information I know. 10 equals negative 4 times 2 plus b. 10 equals negative 8 plus b. Add 8 to both sides. My y-intercept is at 18. So I'm going to rewrite my equation. Y equals negative 4x plus 18. Notice my answer. As we go through all of this, I have an x and a y in my solution. Let's look at our last example in our notes, the exact same type of question, but the first thing I need to do is I need to calculate that slope. So step 1, calculate our slope. And if you have not memorized the slope formula yet, I encourage you to do so. They will not give you the slope formula on the ACT. So I get 3 minus 7 over 3 minus 4, a negative divided by a negative, positive. I then pick one of these points, and it really doesn't matter which point you pick. You can pick either of these points. Let's go with 4, 7. And I'm going to plug that into y equals mx plus b. So I get 7 is equal to 4 times 4 plus b. Solve it, and I get that my y-intercept is negative 9. I then put everything together, my slope, my y-intercept, I get y equals 4x minus 9. Now, if you don't love this approach, you kind of want to go back to the example that we did with the graphing where we use the point slope form, you can definitely do that. And if you have questions or want me to show you an additional example, please feel free to let me know. Thanks for your time.